This is your basic switch jig. This is for a number 4. The jig is made from 3/4 inch plywood with 1/4 inch strips of wood fastened to the top. And as you can see, they're spaced according to the drawing that has been included in your switch kit. And down here at the end is where the entrance of the switch is, and this can be made out of just any type of extruded aluminum. You can buy it at Home Depot or any hardware store, cut into small 1/4 inch pieces and holes put in them so you can capture the foot of the rail. The one going across your screen actually determines where the ends of the rail are, and they should be 0.7 inches from the back side of the tie, or according to the drawing that was included in your kit. You'll see on the jig that the only place you have those rail guides is on the straight side, and the reason for this is that determines the entire layout of the switch. Now we'll go ahead and start adding the ties to this jig before we put the rail in place. So now we're going to lay our first rail, the straight one, into the pocket at the foot, and as you can see it sits right against the back of that, and that determines the distance to the tie. And it also fits in these other clips along the way, and that's our reference for the straight side of this switch. So now we're going to add the curved section, and you'll notice at the entrance of the switch there's a little small bend right where the point pocket is for this. And you got to make sure you don't take that out. Don't try and straighten it out, because that's really important to get the alignment of the points and your entrance rails correct. So anyway, this rail will go in on the end there, and we're going to put 2 snap gauges on that end, and we're going to clamp it down so that we can hold that in place and gauge, and then we'll work on the rest of it. So now we have the snap gauges in place. So the entrance of the switch is 2 gauge, and it's held in place so that as we add the other rails, it won't move on us. And you can see right now I have my inside curve rail and the outside straight rail, to which we're going to add the frog points and the point rails, and we're going to do that right now. Okay, so I've just added the frog, the wing rails, and the point rails. This is one assembly that comes in your kit, and it's already soldered together on the back side. So all you have to do is put it inside the point pockets, and what you want to do is get as close you can to the end of the point pocket. I would leave about 1/8 of an inch just for room to spare. And what you want to do is get it roughly parallel to the straight track. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come back about 10 inches from the point. We're going to come back about 10 inches, and that's where we're going to start spiking on these 2 rails. The outer and the straight rail will be spiked the full length. So I'm going to go ahead and add some snap gauges to each side of the ties that I'm going to spike to hold it engaged while we spike it. And on this number 4, I'm using 12 snap gauges. You could probably get away with a few less, but I'm just in the habit of using more than I need, and that way I can move much quicker when I'm spiking. The other thing I do is I have 2 spare trucks that I have gauged the wheels, the back-to-back spacing on these wheels. This one is the worst case, and this came directly from a Bachmann manufacturer. The spacing in here is 1.55 back to back. This is the worst case. The one back here is the best case, and it is 1.61. And so, and the reason I do that is because if I built the switch exactly to the NMRA standards, some of your rolling stock would pop out going through this part of the switch right here, from there and the back side of this rail. and that's where the back-to-back spacing is really important, but you also got to have the correct spacing to have the flange miss the point. And so that's why I use these two trucks to check the gauge after I get it all set up. And here's how I do it. So I'll take my worst case truck and I'll set it down inside the groove here, and you can see how this goes through and there's no dragging at all. You still get a little bit of side play, which is perfect, but the wheel does not have a tendency to pop out. Now if this was a little too wide right here, this wheel would tend to pop right up like this. Now we check the other one as well, and same thing. I got a good distance there of about 10 thousandths. That's perfect right there. And then I'm going to take the other truck, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bias it or push it in this direction and make sure that it clears the point correctly. And you can see there it glides right past the point, which is what it's supposed to do. And the same with on this side. See, if I'm pushing it to the left side of the screen there, you can see how the flange misses the point. And that's what you want it to do. This will guarantee that you have flawless operation through your switches. Okay, so the next step is we're going to add a piece of, this is a 1/32 printed circuit board, and you can actually use anything that's hard surfaced but thin like that, like a little strip of aluminum. I wouldn't go much greater than 1/32 of an inch. And what we're going to do is we're going to slide that under the first tie that we're going to spike down. So I'm just inserting that under there. What that does is it makes this tie a 1/32 of an inch higher than all the rest of them. So when I clamp it right here, the rail is clamped down to that tie, and so as you're spiking it, it won't move on you. Okay? And then the other thing I do is I'll add some weight. I have a Scotch-Brite pad here with a chunk of steel, and I just apply that to the end of the switch to keep it from popping up, raising up, etc. So we're going to go ahead and start clamping down and spiking now. Okay, so you can see I have spiked here, 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 and there on both sides of the rail, and I always put 2 spikes on each side. And I actually use the spiker tool to do that. It goes much faster. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way towards the exit of the switch. And so what I'm going to be doing is spiking this first tie where I did, and you can see on my jig I've marked that because that is roughly 10 inches from the points down here. So that's where you want to start spiking. And the reason for that is this amount of rail right here, this 10 inches of code 250, gives you plenty of flex in there where you don't have to have a hinge point in there anywhere on your rail. And so it makes it much less susceptible to derailments without those hinge points. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work down every other tie. So I'm going to go to this one, this one, this one, and then I'm finishing up the ends, and then I'll work my way back to the same point. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go start down the entrance and get those 2 spiked, and then I'll show you how we do the center. So one of the things you'll notice on this is under this 3/8 inch piece of steel that's wrapped in tape that I use to clamp down the switch, at this end out here on the outside riding on the jig is a piece of aluminum, and I've got some hard rubber taped to it to space it up correctly. The reason I do that is what this does is it elevates this end about 10 thousandths more than this rail. And so when I clamp it, it tends to put more pressure on this side, so I can make sure that these ties are held in place securely while I'm spiking them. Because my clamp is so short, it only ends up in the center of this rail. And so if you have problems with the ends of these ties being loose, go ahead and try and put a spacer in there. That really helps. Okay, so as you can see now, we have spiked the entire exit end of the switch back to the point where the point rails get spiked. Now from here we're going to move down to the entrance of the switch, and we're going to spike the last two ties on this switch and get that part finished up, and then we'll do the point area, and I'll show you how we do that. Okay, so we've spiked in the first two ties here, and so the entrance of our switch is engaged, and we on all the tie snap gauges have been removed from the switch. We no longer need those. Now you can see that PC board strip is under a position right here, and the reason for that is because if you look down in between the rails, it's the last place that I can put spikes on the inside and the outside. Down here there's not room, nor here, and so what we're going to do is we're going to actually drill a hole through the outside to hold this rail in place both directions, and I'll show you that in a second. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to check to make sure that this bend and that bend match each other, engage all the way through, and we'll make some tweaks to it if we need to, as well as the straight side and this point rail. And so the way we do that is we do one at a time.